It wasn't easy, but in their win over the Memphis Grizzlies, the New Orleans Pelicans showed you exactly who they are, both good and bad. But they are in the postseason. So now what? It's a Thursday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available here on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Thursday, a 138-131 win, overtime win over the Memphis Grizzlies for the Pelicans. Pelicans officially in the NBA's postseason, clinching at least a spot in the play-in tournament. That was a game, y'all. That was a game. We're going to talk about both the good and the bad, because I do think both good and bad, the Pelicans showed you who they are. Kind of both sides of really the same coin here. But they're in, and that's ultimately what matters. It's tough. That game was just so wild, and we'll get into all of it, of course. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday for y'all, breaking down everything you want to know about the team this season. Completely free. No one else comes to you like this. No one else comes to you with all the hot takes, saying all these crazy things just to drive engagement. We're just giving you the Pelicans analysis that you want here. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Tell a friend about the show. And if you want to support the channel, comment down below on YouTube. That's the number one thing you can do. You don't need to give money or anything like that. Comment down below on YouTube. So a 138-131 just wild win. They were down 19. They were up 6 with 11 seconds to go. Then the game was tied and it went to overtime. And then they dominated the overtime period. Just an incredible up and down game. But this does say something about this Pelicans team. And what it says is they reached deep down and did what they needed to do. Something that they did not do against the Sacramento Kings. Just last night. This was a game they needed to respond. And this was a game where if they faced some adversity, and they did early on, they were going to show you who they truly are, good or bad. And in the end, they got the win, and they showed you more good than bad, and that's the important thing. This is what we thought the Pelicans could do. In the fourth quarter, they made adjustments, everybody. Made adjustments. Figuring out how to generate some offense. 7 straight made threes. They were 7 of 9 from 3 in the fourth quarter, with Trey Murphy hitting all 4 of his, Herb Jones hitting 1, CJ McCollum going 2 of 3, and then Josh Richardson missed 1. It's okay, Josh. We still love you. This was a game that they needed to adjust because Brandon Ingram was contained the entirety of the first half. Got nothing done. Took 2-3 shots total in the first half. You're going to lose games when that's the case because of the way he took 5 shots in the first half, because of the way that the Memphis Grizzlies were defending him. And then in the fourth quarter, he came alive. 10 points in the fourth period, 4 assists going to those 3-point shooters, getting to his spots, getting fouled, and making all 6 of his free throws. This was the type of Brandon Ingram controlling the offense, doing everything he needed to do to get this team the victory. Then in overtime, he only scored 1 point. The Pelicans won the overtime period by 14-7, and he only scored 1 point. But 4 assists and 0 turnovers, pulling the strings, orchestrating the offense, playmaking, BI, setting screens for him, running actual actions instead of just letting him dribble into contested mid-range jumpers. The Pelicans adjusted, and they needed, and Willie Green, who has gotten a lot of deserved criticism, deserves credit on this one. You know they've been capable of doing this. We've seen this before. They went on, they're now, what does it make it, 8-1, 8-2 in their last 10 games, something like that now. This is a team that has been good They've generated offense. They also revert to some bad habits. And in the game against the Sacramento Kings just the other night, literally the show I recorded yesterday, they did not adjust well and they lost because of it. But they showed you they're capable of it. They dominated OT with really good defense and running very good offense. This is the team we've been waiting to see. Better late than never, and they need to be a little bit more consistent, but finding ways to generate clean looks for Trey Murphy in rhythm, which is what those shots were, beautiful. Getting CJ off ball, creating good looks for him, perfect. Brandon Ingram not able to score like he wanted to. It's okay. You can get him 24 points and 13 assists in this one, and only 4 turnovers, which all things considered, pretty good. It was exhausting. It was an exhausting game, and the Pelicans aren't built to win just running away for the most part without Zion Williamson. We'll get an update on him at some point today, maybe by the time you're listening to this, and we'll talk about it in tomorrow's show. He was at the game. Wasn't at the game against the Sacramento Kings, was at the game last night, tonight, depending on when you're listening to this, against the Memphis Grizzlies. So who knows what that means yet. But this is the team that would go, oh, this team is okay. They're not going to beat tons and tons of teams. They might not win a first-round playoff series, but they can get into the postseason. They can get into the actual NBA playoffs outside of just the play-in tournament and be competitive like they were last year and basically look like the team that they were last year because it's more or less the same team. That's okay, all things considered, I think, with the injuries that they've had this year. And for them to realize the stakes, know that maybe they probably didn't know at the time that the Dallas Mavericks had won, but realizing you have to win this game and it secures that play-in berth, they reached deep down and they did it. That's not always easy to do, and they didn't do it last night, so credit to this team for doing it. Trey Murphy playing out of his mind. Again, you need to create good shots for him. He said they needed to do that in his post-game talk last game, and they did. 7 of 13 from 3, 30 points from him. Herb Jones working well off ball. The Memphis Grizzlies were like, we'll let anyone beat us other than Brandon Ingram. And that really meant Herb Jones with how they were defending him with Jaren Jackson Jr. 35 points, 7 rebounds for him. He was 5 of 8 from 3. He's getting closer to a 35 to 40% shooter from 3 this year. He's been good the past month and a half, 2 months. He delivered. They needed someone to score when BI was getting bottled up by the Memphis Grizzlies, and Herb Jones stepped up. It's career high in the NBA for him. He didn't ever score over 30 in college. He thinks this might be the highest he's ever scored in any game ever, which is wild to think about. Heroes for the Pelicans, and CJ one night after an awful night really getting it going too. Good performances by the team to adjust and to make the most of what looked like a game that was done and over. And this is why you don't give up and why you play through things. 19-point comeback for the win, even if they almost threw it away. But here's the thing. They were down by 19. They almost threw this game away. And the Memphis Grizzlies aren't playing their best players. Let's look at the bad and things the Pelicans need to figure out before you get to the actual postseason if they want to continue on and advance. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Before we do that, though, today's episode of Locked On Pelicans brought to you by Ibotta. We're always throwing money at something. Kids' school supplies, a new house project. The list goes on. It's time to stop spending your hard-earned money without getting anything in return. Enter Ibotta. You can earn cash back on every shopping trip. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items, from produce to personal care to pantry goods. You either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop, and you get cash back. It's that easy. And the average Ibotta user earns $120 a year in real cash back. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip. You'd use that cash back to buy the flight you've been eyeing, that game you've been dying to go to. The Pelicans have another home game here. Or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Typical basket of groceries was over $50 at the end of 2022. You could earn 2.5 times that in cash back from Ibotta. And Ibotta gives you real cash back, not points. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, you get real cash back that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. You can earn cash back on hundreds of online brands and retailers too when you start with Ibotta, including Lowe's. That's good for me. Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering Locked On listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta when you use the code LOCKED when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play and download the free Ibotta app and use code LOCKED. That's Ibotta, IBOTTA, like the Pelicans jersey patch, in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKED. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. And I truly mean that. I really mean that. Thank you. It's the end of the season. We got at least one more extra game for the Pelicans. And I'll be honest, I'm tired. I'm a little burnt out trying to push through to the end of the year, but it gets long. I was up till 1:30 a.m. last night. It's after 11:30 when I'm recording this right now. It gets tiring. I have a day job too. But y'all keep me going. I do this because of y'all. Not for y'all, but because of y'all. All of you coming up and saying hi at the games, wanting to talk about the Pelicans, your passion makes this fun. I sat down to record. I'm beat. I couldn't wait to record the show for you. So look, please subscribe. That would be great. Support the channel as much as you can. But more than anything, just like, thank you. Thank you for making Locked On Pelicans, Locked On NBA, which I'm on, or any Locked On show, part of your day and being along for the ride. It's been an up and down year, and it's been fun because of the community around this team. So thank you all very, very much. So let's keep talking about this game. I just said the nice, happy things right there because we got to talk about some of the negative. And again, credit to the Pelicans for pulling out this win. This one looked like it was done probably at halftime. Getting ready to maybe leave at the end of the third, depending on how things were going. But they went on a bit of a run and managed to make this one kind of close. And that's what they needed to do. And then the fourth quarter, great performances individually to make your shots, but also as a team to kind of work in unison and run those kind of actions that you needed to. Pick and rolls where you're rejecting the screen using the overeagerness of a guy like Dillon Brooks, who ended up fouling out because of that, to your advantage to create clean looks for Brandon Ingram and others. It was a good adjustment by the Pelicans, by head coach Willie Green, figuring out what was working and going to it. It was very different than the first half. But there was bad in this one too. And if the Pelicans do want to advance out of the play-in tournament or make some noise in the postseason in the first round, they need to figure some of this stuff out, right? This was a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde game. That first half was pretty abysmal for New Orleans. Down 19, and there was no offense. No offense going. BI was bottled up, and they didn't really have any idea of what to do to try and score points. And you could see that really hurting the defense too. They were getting out there and getting scored on because, as I've said, everything is connected all year. Bad offense leads to worse defense. That was happening in this game. The Pelicans want to force the Grizzlies into turnovers to be able to get out and run. And for the most part, until the fourth quarter, that didn't happen whatsoever. In the first half, the Memphis Grizzlies had 3 total turnovers. In the third quarter, the Grizzlies had 2. It was 5 total turnovers for them in the first 3 quarters. And then you forced 4 in the fourth quarter. And in OT, you had 4 as well. And that's what won you the game. Making your shots, getting back, getting set, being able to play your aggressive defense, not in transition. But that only can happen when you have offense. So when you saw the Memphis Grizzlies doing everything that the Sacramento Kings did to the same kind of effect to bottle up and limit Brandon Ingram, this game looked like it was going to be trouble. And I'll be honest, as I'm sitting there watching the game, I'm kind of always thinking about how do you plan the show out? What are my segments? What's kind of the main theme? What's the big takeaway that I want y'all to have? What do I put in that cold open that I do that makes you want to listen? And honestly, I was kind of writing it in my head at the time, and it was basically, have NBA teams figured out the Pelicans? Something along those lines, because we were seeing the same thing happen in both games where BI was just ineffective. And in the game against the Sacramento Kings, we saw the Pelicans unable to counter. And for the first half, they were unable to counter and make adjustments. Credit to them for figuring it out. They showed you who they are, but they also showed you who they could be and are in that first half too, with the inability to score those kind of points. You also saw at times them maybe overthink things a little bit with the lineups that they would use. The Memphis Grizzlies went out and grabbed 15 offensive boards in this one. The New Orleans Pelicans are a good defensive rebounding team. When you come to me and say, they always give up tons of offensive boards, like, no, they don't. They're the 7th best defensive rebounding team going into this game. But 15 offensive boards for 24 second chance points for the Memphis Grizzlies almost cost the Pelicans the game. And here's the thing. Did Ja Morant play in this game? Nope. A couple other guys who weren't playing this game. Steven Adams is another starter. Nope. Luke Kennard is one of their better shooters. Nope. Now, the Pelicans didn't have Zion, so we don't need to kind of get into that. Our Locked On Grizzlies host was like, I'm not worried about this because it took overtime for the Pelicans to beat a real shorthanded Grizzlies team. And it's like, well, the Pels are shorthanded too, man. But you look at this, and that does concern you a little bit. They were resting or didn't have some of their best guys, and it was still a slog. And I don't love that, though the Pelicans are shorthanded too. And let's see what that update on Zion Williamson is going to be. You've got to be able to kind of figure some of those things out. Do you stick with a guy like Jonas Valanciunas, who did get in foul trouble, because you know you're not going to close the game with him, so you may as well keep him out there to help with some of the rebounding? Can you make those adjustments sooner to generate some more offense so that it's not too little too late, or take almost like historic, unconventional shooting? You know, I don't really think it's sustainable to expect the Pelicans to go 7 for 9 from 3.5. That's just not kind of how this team is. And that worries me. So they need to really figure that stuff out, because if this happens in the play-in tournament, it's not a guarantee that you're going to be able to dig yourself out of that hole, or that you're playing a shorthanded team that's going to help you get that win. There was bad with this too. The Pelicans showed you who they are, both good and bad. They showed you kind of both ends of the extreme of where they're on. And it's on them to kind of really figure out which side they are. And that leads us to the next segment. Pelicans are in the play-in tournament. That's a really good thing. They've locked that in. We get at least one extra game. But now what? And that's the big question, I think, around New Orleans right now. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Before we get to that, though, today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and now is the perfect time to download the FanDuel app, America's #1 sportsbook. Because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. I love the layout. It's super intuitive. And you can bet on everything from the money line, the over-unders, to threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. If you took Pelicans -5 and Trey Murphy to make 3 or more threes, it'll win a whole bunch more money. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday for y'all. No one else comes to you like this, with the type of analysis that you want about this team, completely free, every single day. We'll have a show after every postseason playoff game that they have, even if it's on the weekends as well. So don't worry, we'll probably have bonus shows incoming. And now for your second listen, Game to Game NBA. I do a minute little recap after every game. So do all of our hosts. They get compiled into one show. So if you just want to know what happened in each individual game, go give that a listen, a watch. It's on YouTube, the Odyssey app, and wherever you get your podcasts. So we can all breathe a sigh of relief, a little bit of a sigh of relief, because you know what? The Pelicans have clinched a play-in spot. That feels really good to say. This year has been up and down. It's been long. It's been disappointing from when the Pelicans were first in the West, when they were third in the West too. And it's due to injuries, and it's derailed this season. But to kind of recover in the way that they have, to feel like they're kind of on the same track from last year when they were riding pretty high after that, I think is good. And if they get some health next year, I get it, big if, you feel pretty good about it. And we'll get an update on Zion Williamson today. I don't know whether it's going to be good or bad. I have some idea. I don't think it's going to be the best. My guess, here's my guess, and you don't hold me to this because this is partially informed as best I could. I think if they make the first round of the playoffs, the actual NBA postseason, he'll play. I don't think he's going to play during the regular season now. I don't know if he will play. I lean towards no in the play-in tournament. I think it would take them getting into, for their first round series before seeing him. So now what? Currently, as it stands, based on, I'm looking at this Laker game, and they're going to lose, so I don't know how that's going to change things, actually. That could be good or bad. That means they're going to be tied with the Pelicans, which basically means right now you're looking at Golden State 5, the Clippers 6, or one of them 5 or 6, Lakers 7, Pelicans 8, Timberwolves 9, Oklahoma City Thunder 10. It's not ideal. It's not ideal, and you'd like the Pelicans to win out, and hopefully the Lakers lose a game so that you can kind of jump them, I think, in the standings. Here's the thing. Since LeBron James did the kind of whining after that admittedly blown call by the refs against the Boston Celtics, and the little NBA ref Twitter account put out like, we're so sorry, we're going to be up at night. The Lakers have been getting all the freaking calls, all the calls. To advance into the actual NBA postseason, if you're the 7 or 8 seed, you're going to have 2 games minimum to win, or 2 games to win 1. Or 1 game to win 1. You got to win 1. It's the 7 versus 8, which means it would be the Pelicans at the Los Angeles Lakers. I'm not going into that without thinking the refs are going to favor the Lakers so freaking heavily, which means you play the winner at home in New Orleans of the 9-10 game, Minnesota versus Oklahoma City. Both those games are going to be, either of those teams, it's going to be very winnable for New Orleans, but all of a sudden becomes do or die, win or go home, and I don't love that. So if New Orleans can find a way to get to 7 instead of 8 and host that home game, which maybe, even if it is against the Los Angeles Lakers, the refs aren't going to be as blatantly awful as they're going to be in LA, I'd feel better. Which means you need to take care of business against the New York Knicks, who put up a whole ton of points tonight. Everyone's playing, and I'm like catching up on everything, and it's kind of wild. I saw they had like 3 guys with 30 plus, scored 138, which is kind of ridiculous. Without Julius Randle, right? You had Emmanuel Quickly with 39, Quentin Grimes with 36, Obi Toppin with 32, and then our personal favorite Josh Hart with 6 points. We had the highest plus minus of everyone on the team. That's kind of funny. So win the final game against the Minnesota Timberwolves, and they're going to be playing to win too because their seeding might depend on it. It might be the difference for them between getting in and out. What now means you need to avoid that first half that you just had against the Memphis Grizzlies, that game against the Sacramento Kings, because I want this to kind of be in the hands of the Pelicans and not the hands of the refs. And it feels like if you go on the road to LA, that's what we're going to be talking about. And the Lakers, of all the play-in tournament teams, given that they have LeBron James and Anthony Davis, as much as it pains me to say it, feels like they could be the team that, could upset whoever they play in the first round compared to any of the other teams, unless it's the Pelicans and they have Zion Williamson healthy. So you need to kind of figure out exactly who you are right now. The Pelicans showed you both their good and their bad. Let's cut one of those out, the bad one, not the good one, and just be a good team and really try and work through some things. They're going to be off on Thursday. They have the game on Friday, the final home game. And then you have a practice on Saturday before you close the season Sunday against the Minnesota Timberwolves. That practice on Saturday feels really important for the Pelicans to be able to close the season strong because, you're in the play-in tournament. And if you lose out or lose one game, that's okay and you're still there. But you've got to try and control as much of this as you can because you don't want this taken out of your hands and have no chance in the playoffs or don't even make the actual playoffs because of referees and things like that. Really go through some good film sessions these next couple days whenever you get a chance to figure out that when teams double Brandon Ingram and deny him the ball or double him when he has the ball and try and force him into bad shots, how do you manufacture those other good open looks for your other players so that you don't have a first half like you did against the Memphis Grizzlies? That feels really important to me right now. We'll see what they do. Friday's going to be fun. Final home game of the season. I will be there. If you see me, please say hi. Don't be scared to come up to me, and I'll probably be hanging out around there in the concourse at some point with some people, so it should be a lot of fun. Going to be a fun end of the season. I love this. Thanks for being along for the ride, and we got more to go. At least 3 more games instead of just 2, which is a good start to things. So as always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and I'll be back with y'all tomorrow. We're going to kind of preview some things and see who the Pelicans want to face maybe in the first round of the playoffs and maybe answer some of your questions as well. So thank you all for listening. I'll be back with y'all tomorrow.